my fiancé said, "I'm bringing my best guy friend to our anniversary weekend. He's never been to a nice resort." I smiled and nodded. Then I canceled our reservations and booked a trip with someone else. What she found on my desk the day before our anniversary. 3 years with Emma felt like building something real until I realized I was actually the third wheel in my own relationship. I'm Connor, 27, work in IT specializing in network security for a mid-sized firm downtown, and Emma's an event coordinator who's brilliant at managing everyone's life except apparently understanding basic relationship boundaries. We met through mutual friends at a trivia night where she impressed me by knowing obscure 90s music facts and actually listening when I explained why our team's Wi-Fi kept crashing, but what I didn't know then was that her college best friend Blake would become the unofficial third member of our relationship. Blake's this 28-year-old aspiring musician who treats my apartment like his personal rehearsal space and Emma like his emotional support system, showing up unannounced at 9 p.m. on Tuesday nights with his guitar and some new crisis about his artistic journey that apparently requires Emma's immediate and undivided attention. The first time it happened, I was cooking dinner for Emma and me, nothing fancy, just pasta with this mushroom sauce she loves, when Blake walked through our door using the spare key Emma had given him for emergencies. "Emma, babe, you won't believe what happened at the open mic tonight," he said, completely ignoring me standing there with a wooden spoon in my hand, and Emma's face lit up like he'd just announced he'd won a Grammy. I watched our romantic dinner turn into a 2-hour therapy session about how the music industry doesn't understand real talent while my carefully timed pasta went cold and Blake helped himself to the wine I'd bought for our date night. Initially, I tried to be the understanding boyfriend because Emma would always explain, "Blake's going through such a tough time with his music career, Connor, and his ex just broke up with him again, so he really needs supportive friends right now," making me feel like a selfish ass for wanting to spend an evening alone with my own girlfriend. The pattern became suffocating. Blake would text Emma during our movie nights needing to process his latest romantic disaster, show up during our weekend hiking trips because he needed nature's healing energy, and somehow Emma always found a way to justify his intrusions by framing them as emergencies that required her immediate compassion. What really got to me was how Blake never acknowledged my presence beyond a casual nod, like I was some temporary roommate Emma was tolerating until she came to her senses, and the few times I tried to join their conversations about his music or his problems, he'd give me this look that clearly said, "Adults are talking." Emma would notice my silence and later ask, "Why don't you try harder to connect with Blake? He's like family to me, and it would mean everything if you two could be friends." But what she didn't understand was that Blake had already made it crystal clear that I wasn't welcome in their world, I was just funding it. The emotional manipulation was bad enough, but discovering Emma had been secretly bankrolling Blake's entire existence using our shared savings account felt like getting punched in the financial gut by someone I trusted completely. I found out by accident when I was reviewing our monthly statements for a budget discussion Emma kept postponing, and there were these random transfers to be Morrison that Emma had labeled as emergency loans and temporary help without ever mentioning Blake needed money for rent, studio time, or his new guitar equipment that somehow became my involuntary investment in his musical dreams. When I confronted Emma about the $1,200 in transfers over 2 months, she got defensive and said, "Blake's struggling to make ends meet while pursuing his passion, Connor, and I thought you'd understand since you're always talking about supporting people's goals," completely missing the irony that she'd never asked if I supported financing her best friend's lifestyle with money we'd saved for our future apartment deposit. The financial drain was just the beginning because Blake started treating our home like his personal crash pad, showing up during our romantic dinners with takeout containers expecting to join us, arriving uninvited to our weekend hiking trips with his guitar for campfire sessions that lasted until midnight, and eventually just staying overnight on our couch whenever he claimed he couldn't afford his utilities this month. I'd wake up Saturday mornings to find Blake making coffee in my kitchen wearing my Northwestern sweatshirt like he lived there, and when I mentioned to Emma that boundaries might be healthy, she accused me of being jealous of Blake's artistic dreams, and insisted that supporting friends is what good people do. Not everyone can be as privileged as you with your stable IT job. The breaking point came when I got home early from work with surprise sushi from Emma's favorite place, only to find Blake using my laptop at my desk, wearing my spare work shirt, and explaining to Emma how he'd reorganized our streaming services to include music production software subscriptions that were apparently essential for his creative process. "Oh hey Connor," Blake said without looking up from my laptop. "Emma said it was cool if I used this for uploading my demo tracks since my computer crashed again, and I borrowed this shirt because I spilled coffee on mine during my session. Hope you don't mind." and the casual entitlement in his voice made my jaw clench while Emma smiled apologetically and mouthed, "Sorry." Like his complete takeover of our shared space was just a minor inconvenience. I pulled Emma aside and said, "This has to stop. He's living here without paying rent, using our stuff without asking, and you're enabling him by treating our relationship like a charity fund for his dreams." But Emma's response was the same script every time. "Blake is family to me, Connor, and he's going through the hardest period of his life trying to make it in music. So we need to be more compassionate about people who are struggling to survive in creative fields." What really twisted the knife was discovering that while Blake was playing the struggling artist card with us, he was posting Instagram stories from expensive downtown bars and wearing new designer sneakers, apparently funded by Emma's emergency loans, that were supposed to cover his basic survival needs but somehow included a social life nicer than what I could afford on my actual salary. The final straw came when Blake started bringing dates back to our apartment, introducing our living room as his place to women he was trying to impress. And when I asked Emma how she felt about subsidizing Blake's romantic pursuits with our grocery money, she said, "You're being really ugly about this, Connor. Successful relationships require sacrifice and understanding, and Blake deserves to experience happiness just like everyone else." I realized then that Emma wasn't just prioritizing Blake's needs over mine, she was actively building a life with him using my stability as the foundation, and every time I tried to address the inequality, she made me feel like a selfish monster for wanting basic respect in my own relationship and home. Planning our 3-year anniversary weekend felt like my last chance to reconnect with Emma before Blake's constant presence completely eroded what we'd built together, so I used my recent promotion bonus to senior systems analyst to book us a luxury mountain resort with a private hot tub and couples spa treatments, thinking 2 days of uninterrupted time might remind her why we'd fallen in love in the first place. I spent weeks researching the perfect cabin at Pine Ridge Resort, reading reviews and comparing amenities until I found this incredible place with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley, a master suite with a fireplace, and that private hot tub on the deck where we could watch the sunset without any distractions or uninvited guests crashing our romantic moments. The reservation confirmation felt like a small victory because for the first time in months, I was planning something that Blake couldn't infiltrate, something that was just ours. And I even arranged for champagne service and a couple's massage package that cost more than my monthly car payment but seemed worth it to salvage our relationship. 2 weeks before our departure, Emma casually dropped the bomb over breakfast while I was checking weather forecasts and mentally packing lists, saying, "Oh, by the way, I invited Blake to come with us to the mountains because he's never experienced anything nice like this and deserves to see how real adults vacation." As if she just mentioned bringing extra sunscreen instead of completely destroying the entire purpose of our romantic getaway. The words hit me like a system crash, that moment when everything stops working and you're staring at a blank screen trying to process what just happened, and I sat there with my coffee halfway to my lips wondering if I'd misheard or if Emma had actually just turned our anniversary weekend into a group vacation with her emotionally dependent best friend. "You invited Blake to our anniversary trip?" I asked, setting down my mug carefully because my hands were starting to shake with the kind of controlled rage that comes from months of accumulated disrespect finally reaching a breaking point. "Don't say it like that, Connor," Emma replied, already defensive. "Blake's been so depressed about his music career stalling, and he's never stayed anywhere nice in his entire life, so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to show him what's possible when you work hard and achieve success like we have." The casual way she said, "we have," when referring to my promotion and my bonus money that I'd earned through years of late nights and professional development courses made my jaw clench, because apparently my individual achievements had become community property in Emma's mind, resources to be distributed according to her emotional priorities rather than our relationship goals. But the real gut punch came when Emma continued explaining her logic. "I already told Blake he could have the master bedroom because he needs good sleep for his creativity, and we can take the pull-out couch since we're more flexible about accommodations." Turning our romantic anniversary into a charity event where I'd be sleeping on a fold-out bed in the living room of a cabin I'd paid for with money I'd earned from a promotion she was celebrating by giving my benefits to another man. I sat there in stunned silence, watching Emma text Blake the good news about their friend trip, while I processed the layers of betrayal happening in real time. She'd invited her male best friend to our anniversary weekend without asking, promised him the romantic master suite I'd specifically booked for us, relegated me to furniture in my own vacation rental, and was using my promotion bonus to fund Blake's first taste of luxury travel. Blake says thank you so much and he's already planning some acoustic sets for the evening since the cabin has such great acoustics, Emma announced, reading from her phone with genuine excitement while I felt my carefully planned romantic weekend dissolving into another Blake-centered event where I'd be paying premium prices to watch my girlfriend prioritize his happiness over our relationship. The most devastating part wasn't even the money or the ruin plans, it was Emma's complete inability to understand why I might object to spending my anniversary watching Blake enjoy the romantic getaway I designed for us, her genuine confusion when I didn't immediately share her enthusiasm for turning our couple's retreat into a group therapy session with musical accompaniment. You're being really quiet about this, Emma said, looking up from her phone where she was apparently coordinating Blake's packing list. I thought you'd be happy that we're including Blake in something special, showing him that we care about his well-being and want him to experience nice things too. And her expectation that I'd be grateful for the opportunity to finance Blake's vacation with my anniversary money revealed just how completely she'd lost sight of what relationships are supposed to prioritize. I realized in that moment that Emma wasn't just failing to understand my perspective, she was actively choosing to misinterpret my silence as agreement rather than the shocked recognition that our relationship had become a vehicle for her to redistribute my resources according to her personal charity preferences, with Blake as the primary beneficiary and me as the unwilling donor who was expected to smile and be grateful for the privilege of funding his dreams. Instead of exploding or arguing, I did what any good IT specialist does when facing a system breach. I went into investigation mode, using my professional skills to audit exactly how deep Emma's financial deception ran and what other lies I'd been unknowingly funding through our supposedly shared accounts. That evening, while Emma excitedly planned hiking routes and restaurant reservations for her trio vacation, I quietly accessed our bank statements, credit card records, and shared savings account to trace every transaction back to its source, applying the same methodical approach I used for network security assessments to uncover the full scope of Blake's infiltration into our financial life. The results were staggering and frankly insulting. Over the past 8 months, Emma had transferred $4,300 directly to Blake for rent assistance, studio equipment, and emergency expenses, plus another $1,800 in indirect support through groceries she bought for his apartment, gas money for his car, and even cover charges for clubs where he performed his acoustic sets. What made my stomach turn wasn't just the dollar amount, though seeing $6,100 of our joint resources redirected to Blake's lifestyle certainly stung, but discovering the elaborate lies Emma had constructed to hide these transactions, labeling them as household expenses and miscellaneous charges, when they were actually funding everything from Blake's dating life to his monthly car insurance payments. The deepest betrayal came when I found Emma's Venmo history showing payments to Blake labeled with inside jokes and heart emojis. For my favorite artist 2 hearts, studio time for the next Grammy winner musical note, and keep following your dreams, babe sparkles, language that sounded more like a supportive girlfriend than a platonic friend, making me wonder exactly what kind of relationship I'd been unknowingly subsidizing. I cross-referenced Blake's social media posts with Emma's payment dates and discovered a perfect correlation. Every time Blake posted about new equipment, fancy dinners, or weekend trips, Emma had sent him money within 24 to 48 hours, essentially functioning as his personal patron while I worked overtime to maintain our shared savings goals and future plans. The evidence painted a clear picture that Emma wasn't just prioritizing Blake emotionally, she was actively building a financial partnership with him using my income as collateral, treating our relationship like a business arrangement where I provided stability and resources while she distributed the benefits according to her personal preferences rather than our mutual agreements. My IT training kicked into overdrive as I began documenting everything. Screenshots of transactions, photos of Blake's belongings scattered throughout our apartment, records of canceled dates due to Blake's emergencies, and a comprehensive timeline showing how Emma's financial support for Blake had escalated from occasional small loans to systematic wealth transfer. The most damning evidence came from Emma's text messages with Blake, which I could access through our shared cloud account where she'd been automatically backing up her conversations, revealing months of coordination about money requests, discussions about Connor's promotion bonus, and Blake's expressions of gratitude that sounded distinctly romantic. "You're saving my life. I don't know what I'd do without you believing in me." I realized that Emma had been living a double life, presenting herself as my committed partner while actually functioning as Blake's benefactor and emotional support system, using our shared resources and my financial stability to fund a relationship that had nothing to do with me except as the unwitting source of income. The transformation from hurt boyfriend to strategic analyst was liberating because suddenly I wasn't emotional about Emma's betrayal. I was just collecting data and planning my exit strategy like any other professional project that required systematic execution and attention to detail. As Emma continued planning our anniversary weekend with Blake, oblivious to my investigation, I began preparing for a different kind of departure, one where I'd finally stop being the unknowing third party in my own relationship and start building a life where my resources went toward my actual future instead of subsidizing someone else's dreams at my expense. The next morning, while Emma was at work coordinating someone else's event, I canceled our Pine Ridge Resort reservations and immediately rebooked the entire luxury weekend, but instead of inviting male friends or going alone, I called my older sister Rachel, a successful veterinarian who'd been suspicious of Emma's treatment of me since day one and would probably have some choice words about the Blake situation. "You're finally ready to stop being a doormat?" Rachel said when I explained the situation, her voice mixing relief with barely contained anger at Emma's manipulation. "I've been waiting 2 years for you to realize that girl was using you, and yes, I'll absolutely help you get your stuff out of that apartment while she's playing house with her boyfriend Blake." Rachel's immediate enthusiasm for my escape plan revealed how obvious Emma's disrespect had been to everyone except me, and when I mentioned my concerns about extracting my belongings without drama, Rachel offered to coordinate the entire move during Emma's anniversary weekend, using her veterinary clinic's van and recruiting her husband Mark to help with furniture. While Emma spent her lunch breaks texting Blake about hiking trails and restaurant reservations for their mountain adventure, I systematically dismantled our shared financial life, removing my contributions from joint savings accounts, closing shared credit cards, transferring my portion of our apartment security deposit to my personal account, and redirecting my direct deposit to a bank where Emma had no access or visibility. The methodical process of financial separation felt surprisingly liberating, like finally installing proper security protocols after months of leaving my network vulnerable to unauthorized access, and Emma's complete obliviousness to these changes proved how little attention she actually paid to our practical partnership beyond its utility for funding Blake's lifestyle. But the real revelation came when I decided to investigate Blake's social media presence more thoroughly, discovering months of Instagram posts where he called Emma his soulmate, the one who believes in his dreams, and my inspiration for every song, accompanied by photos of them together at coffee shops, music venues, and romantic-looking dinners that I'd apparently been funding without realizing they were actual dates. The posts painted a clear picture of an emotional relationship that had been developing parallel to our supposed commitment, with Emma liking and commenting on every single post with heart emojis and responses like "always here for you" and "you're going to change the world," language that sounded distinctly more romantic than platonic friendship support. What made my stomach turn wasn't just Blake's obvious romantic feelings for Emma, but the realization that Emma had been actively encouraging and participating in this emotional affair while simultaneously gaslighting me into feeling selfish for wanting basic boundaries around their friendship. The timeline of their social media interactions correlated perfectly with the escalation of Blake's presence in our relationship. The more romantic his posts became, the more Emma defended his need for constant access to our home, our resources, and her emotional energy, suggesting that she wasn't just enabling his dependency but actively cultivating it as part of a deeper relationship that excluded me except as a financial facilitator. I found posts from Blake thanking Emma for believing in us and making our future possible, language that clearly indicated he considered them a couple working toward shared goals, while Emma responded with comments like, "We're going to make all our dreams come true together," using plural pronouns that definitely didn't include me in their vision of success. The evidence was overwhelming. Emma hadn't just been prioritizing Blake's needs over mine, she'd been conducting an emotional affair while using my financial stability to fund their romantic relationship, treating me like an unwitting sponsor for her actual partnership while maintaining the fiction that Blake was just a struggling friend who needed temporary support. As I compiled screenshots of their months-long social media love affair, I realized that Emma's confusion about my objections to Blake wasn't genuine misunderstanding but deliberate manipulation designed to make me feel guilty for interfering with her real relationship, and her insistence on including Blake in our anniversary weekend wasn't misguided friendship loyalty but a natural progression of their emotional affair into physical territory using my money to fund their romantic getaway. 3 days before our supposed anniversary weekend, Emma discovered my counter-reservations while looking for our shared laptop charger on my desk, and finding the Pine Ridge Resort confirmations for Connor Mitchell and Rachel Mitchell instead of the trio vacation she'd been planning with Blake sent her into a fury that finally revealed her true priorities. "What the hell is this?" Emma demanded, waving the printed confirmations like evidence of some crime, her voice sharp with the kind of outrage usually reserved for actual betrayals rather than someone reclaiming their own anniversary plans from unwanted guests. These reservations are for you and Rachel, not our weekend with Blake. Connor, what did you do? And the possessive way she said, our weekend with Blake, instead of, our anniversary, perfectly summarized how completely she'd forgotten that this trip was supposed to celebrate our relationship, not fund her emotional affair. I changed our plans, I said calmly, not looking up from my laptop where I was organizing the evidence I'd spent days collecting. Rachel and I are going to Pine Ridge Resort for the weekend you decided to turn into a charity event for Blake's first luxury vacation experience. Emma's face went through several expressions, confusion, anger, then that calculated look she got when trying to manipulate me back into compliance, before she launched into her prepared script about my pathetically petty behavior and how I was trying to ruin Blake's chance at happiness, because I couldn't handle her having meaningful friendships outside our relationship. You're being incredibly selfish, Connor, Emma said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she used when explaining why my feelings were wrong. Blake has been so excited about this trip, it's the first nice thing that's happened to him in months, and you're destroying his happiness because you're jealous of our friendship and can't stand seeing him succeed. The irony of her accusing me of jealousy while she conducted an emotional affair using my money was almost funny, but I let her continue her performance because I wanted her to fully commit to this narrative before I presented the evidence that would destroy it completely. Blake deserves to experience luxury and beauty just like everyone else, Emma continued, working herself into righteous indignation, and your refusal to share our good fortune with someone who's struggling shows a really ugly side of your character that honestly makes me question what kind of person you really are underneath all that nice guy behavior. When she paused for breath, expecting me to apologize and reverse the reservations like I'd done countless times before when Blake's needs conflicted with our plans, I opened the folder on my desk and pulled out the first set of printed bank statements showing 8 months of secret transfers to Blake totaling $6,100 from our shared accounts. Let's talk about sharing our good fortune, I said, sliding the papers across the desk where Emma could see every highlighted transaction, every lie she'd told about household expenses that were actually funding Blake's lifestyle. Because apparently we've been very generous with my promotion bonus and our anniversary savings without my knowledge or consent. Emma's face went pale as she recognized her own transaction history laid out in black and white, the evidence of her systematic deception organized with the same attention to detail I brought to network security audits, and her stammered protests about temporary loans and emergency help sounded pathetic when confronted with months of deliberate financial betrayal. These were just small amounts to help Blake through tough times, Emma said weakly, but I was already pulling out the second set of evidence. Photographs I'd taken of Blake's belongings scattered throughout our apartment, his guitar in our bedroom, his clothes in our laundry, his toiletries in our bathroom, visual proof that he'd been living with us while Emma pretended he was just visiting occasionally. Small amounts for someone who's essentially moved in without paying rent, I replied, watching Emma's defensive posture crumble as she realized the scope of documentation I'd assembled. But wait, there's more evidence about Blake's temporary situation here. The screenshots of Blake's social media posts calling Emma his soulmate and inspiration hit Emma like a physical blow, her eyes widening as she saw months of romantic language that she'd been encouraging and reciprocating while gaslighting me about their platonic friendship and my unfounded jealousy about their obviously intimate relationship. Blake doesn't mean anything romantic by those posts, Emma said desperately, but her voice lacked conviction because she knew I could see her flirty responses and heart emojis encouraging his public declarations of love. He's just grateful for our support during his artistic journey. You're misinterpreting creative expression as something inappropriate. The killing blow came when I showed Emma the screenshots from Blake's dating profile where he listed her as his sponsor and described me as her temporary situation, revealing that Blake had been openly discussing our relationship as a transitional phase while he waited for Emma to choose him permanently. Temporary situation, I repeated, watching Emma's face cycle through shock, panic, and finally the recognition that her secret had been completely exposed. That's an interesting way for your platonic friend to describe the man whose money has been funding your emotional affair for almost a year. Emma started crying then, not the manipulative tears she'd used to make me feel guilty about wanting boundaries, but the panicked tears of someone realizing their carefully constructed lies had collapsed and their comfortable deception was over forever. Connor, please, you're taking everything out of context, she sobbed, but I had one final piece of evidence that would eliminate any remaining doubt about Blake's intentions and her participation in their emotional affair. I played the audio recording I'd made of Blake at a house party the week before, his voice clear and confident as he told mutual friends that Emma was basically his future wife, and that he was just waiting for me to get tired and leave, because guys like Connor always give up when things get complicated with women like Emma. The recording played Emma's laughter in the background, her voice agreeing that their connection was really special and that she'd never felt this understood by anyone, confirming that their romantic relationship wasn't one-sided fantasy but mutual emotional infidelity that she'd been actively cultivating while using my resources to fund their future together. Emma's tears turned from self-pity to genuine panic as she realized I'd been methodically documenting her betrayal for months, that her casual cruelty hadn't gone unnoticed but had been carefully recorded and organized with the same professional thoroughness I brought to every aspect of my work, and that her attempts to gaslight me about Blake's intentions had been exposed as deliberate emotional manipulation designed to protect her affair. While Emma sat there processing the scope of evidence I'd assembled, I delivered the final blow that would transform her panic into complete devastation. I'd already moved most of my belongings to Rachel's house, canceled our shared Netflix and Spotify accounts, removed my name from our apartment lease effective Monday, and withdrawn my financial support from the elaborate lifestyle she'd been funding for herself and Blake, using my income as the foundation. "What do you mean you removed your name from the lease?" Emma asked, her voice small and shaky as the reality of her situation began penetrating the shock of being completely exposed, and I could see her mentally calculating how much of our shared expenses depended on my $78,000 salary versus her $31,000 event coordination income. "I mean, Rachel helped me research tenant rights, and I discovered that without my portion of the rent, utilities, and household expenses, you'll be responsible for about $2,800 monthly just to maintain this apartment," I explained calmly, watching Emma's face go from confusion to horror as she realized that losing me meant losing the financial stability that made her Blake-centered lifestyle possible. The mathematical reality was brutal and immediate. Emma's take-home pay barely covered her personal expenses and car payment, leaving nothing for rent assistance, Blake's studio time, his equipment purchases, or the constant stream of emergency loans that had been sustaining his artistic dreams for the past year while I unknowingly functioned as their unwitting sponsor. "Connor, you can't just abandon our life together over a misunderstanding about Blake," Emma said desperately, but her use of the word misunderstanding to describe months of documented emotional infidelity and financial deception showed that even now, she couldn't acknowledge the deliberate nature of her betrayal or take responsibility for systematically destroying our relationship. "There's no misunderstanding," I replied, gathering my evidence files and laptop. "You chose Blake over me every single day for months, used my money to fund your emotional affair with him, and planned to spend our anniversary weekend watching him enjoy the romantic getaway I designed for us. So now you get to see how sustainable your choices are without my financial participation." Emma's tears turned desperate as she realized I wasn't negotiating or threatening, but simply implementing a decision I'd already made with the same systematic approach I'd use for any major life change, and her attempts to reframe our conversation as a relationship discussion rather than an exit interview fell flat because I'd already emotionally detached from our partnership weeks ago. "Blake needs me right now," she said, as if that explained everything. "His music career is finally starting to take off, and I can't abandon him when he's so close to success. You have to understand that supporting him is the right thing to do even if it's complicated our relationship temporarily." The fact that Emma still couldn't see Blake's dependence as manipulation rather than genuine need, or recognize that she'd been choosing his dreams over our future consistently for almost a year, confirmed that I was making the right decision by removing myself from a dynamic where my value was measured entirely by my willingness to subsidize someone else's emotional affair. "You're absolutely right," I said, standing up and heading toward the door. "Blake does need you, and now you'll find out if you need him enough to support his dreams with your own money instead of mine, because Rachel and I have a reservation at Pine Ridge Resort tomorrow morning and I'm finally going to experience the anniversary weekend I planned before you decided to turn it into charity work." The drive to the mountain resort with Rachel was the most peaceful I'd felt in months, listening to her stories about veterinary school and her thoughts on building relationships with people who actually prioritize your happiness instead of treating you like a human ATM with emotional benefits. "You know what the best part of this whole situation is?" Rachel said as we checked into the luxury cabin I'd originally booked for Emma and me. "You're finally going to experience what it feels like to spend money on someone who appreciates you instead of someone who sees you as a resource to be exploited for other people's benefit." That weekend, soaking in the private hot tub while Rachel grilled steaks and told me about her plans to expand her veterinary practice, I realized that the peace I'd been seeking for 3 years had been available all along. I just needed to stop trying to earn it from someone who had no intention of providing it. Rachel and I spent Sunday morning hiking the trails Emma had researched for Blake, discussing my plans for a new apartment closer to work and her suggestions for hobbies that didn't involve financially supporting other people's dreams at the expense of my own goals and happiness. When I got back to the city, Emma had already moved Blake into our apartment full-time, apparently deciding that if she was going to lose my financial support anyway, she might as well commit completely to the relationship she'd been conducting behind my back for months. The irony was perfect. Emma finally got exactly what she'd been working toward, a full-time partnership with Blake funded entirely by her own resources, and within 6 weeks, she'd moved back in with her parents because her event coordination salary couldn't sustain 2 people's worth of expenses plus Blake's artistic ambitions. 3 months later, I signed a lease on a downtown loft with exposed brick and huge windows, the kind of space I'd always wanted but never pursued because Emma preferred suburban apartments with room for Blake's equipment and impromptu overnight stays. I heard through mutual friends that Blake had moved on to a different female sponsor after Emma's financial support dried up, confirming what I'd suspected all along. His feelings for her had been directly proportional to her ability to fund his lifestyle. The most satisfying part wasn't Emma's inevitable disappointment when Blake abandoned her after the money stopped flowing, but my own realization that the happiness I'd been trying to build with someone who didn't value me had been waiting for me all along in a life where my resources went toward my actual future instead of subsidizing someone else's emotional affair.